No, I should not be working. You really think I should be working? Like, those migrations, I've been doing this 4 years for like fully automated. No, I don't do this manually. Oh, hey, welcome to the automation lab. Remember a few months where the Titan released MSPComplete? Well, there's some cool things that they've added to the platform. So with runbooks and one-click automation, I can now automate every single service that I want to do. That way, I can just take all my PowerShell scripts, really put it in the platform, and build automation the way that I really want to do. In the old days, I really had my scripts everywhere. So I had my stuff on USB sticks, drives, cloud accounts, and sometimes even old floppies. And that was just because my filing system wasn't really up to date. There it is. Thank you, Declan. Now, with MSPComplete, I can really attach all my scripts to the right service. So if I'm using scripts for a tenant-to-tenant migration, I can just take the service, add the scripts, and I'm done. So let me show you how easy it is. Okay, so I'm just going to start from this empty runbook. What I'm going to do is add all the prescriptive guidance to it, so I'm sure that I'm going to execute every single task the same way over and over again. So let me show you how to do this. Okay. Now I'm going to add a few more scripts. So let's say there's a guy that is paying me to do tenant-to-tenant migration, right? So if you do this manually, one of the most important things that you need to do is really define which users have access to each other's mailboxes. Because if you migrate them to a new tenant and you don't do it together, they will lose access to each other's mailboxes, and that might interrupt their business. So if you do this manually, you have to create this whole inventory, and that takes a lot of time. And that's time you could be spending on other things. Now with my script, it happens automatically. And let me show you on the whiteboard how the script really works. Before we go deeply into the script, I really want to show you what the methodology of the script looks like. And before we do that, I want to show you something on this whiteboard. So these arrows, they're all users, they're all mailboxes, and these are the dependencies between those users. Can be like mailbox permissions like full access, send as, could be a mailbox folder permission, could be a calendar permission, but in some way, shape, or form, those guys are dependent on each other. So that means that when we do a migration into a separate tenant, we need to migrate those guys together. And when you look at those three images, as a human being, you can easily see what the dependencies are. But think about hundreds of mailboxes with different levels of dependencies. You actually need a computer to do so and really find out what the dependencies between the things are. Now, there's some difficulties when you ask or when you're going to create an algorithm to do so. The first one, when you look at it, is there's different levels. So here, when you look at this path, we have 3 levels. When you look at this path, there's only 2 levels. When you look here, we have 4 levels, and even worse, we actually have a circular loop here. When you look at this one, we actually have everything combining onto one point. So when you create an algorithm, you have to find an algorithm that is capable of running against an input like this, no matter how much levels there are. And one of the algorithms or type of algorithms that I like to use for that is a recursive algorithm. Now, how does it work? Pretty easy, right? So we're going to create a function and we're going to give it this value as a parameter. Then we're going to look, does A still have dependencies? Yes, it does. It has B and E. Okay. If that is the case, we're going to call the same type of algorithm, but now with value A, while this is still in memory. So what happens here now is, okay, we do the same. Does B still have dependencies? Yes, C and D. So now we're going to C. Does C still have dependencies? No. So we're going to add C to our list. Now we go back to B. Does B still have dependencies? No, yes, actually D. So now we're going to do the same for D. Does D have dependencies? No. So now we can add D. B does not have dependencies anymore because we've done the algorithm for both those dependencies. So now we can add B, A needs to cover E and A. So now we have the whole group of users who need to be migrated together. Now we can do that for every single instance of our examples. The only thing now that is going to be a problem is here. When you look at K, so we're going to go through here. When we come at K, we're going to see that one of the dependencies on K is H. So the problem is that you're going to have a circular dependency going down here. So what we're going to do is, per instance, we're going to keep a list. Next one is I, then we have K, and the next dependency would be H. Since H is already a part of that dependency, right, we are going to skip that. So now these dependency is actually ignored. Now we're going to L, and then we're going all the way up to J, M. So this is a way to avoid that whole circular motion. It's by using a list to keep track of all your different actions. Now the third one is very similar to the first one, but let's make it a little bit more difficult. So now we're going to make a dependency between those two. So right, you start here at H, it goes all the way to S, RS. So our whole algorithm needs to be able to keep that in mind. So what we normally do, if you go here with R, it goes in S, it goes in J. Normally you would go to M, but because we already know that J is a part of group 2, we know that everything attached here to R also will belong to group 2, and we have that covered. That's actually how the algorithm works that we're going to be covering in the script. So it's a recursive algorithm, so it really goes down into these dependencies. And the cool thing is, if you write this algorithm the way that it's supposed to be written, it doesn't matter if it's 1,000 users, 20 users, 100 users. It doesn't matter if there's 500 dependencies or only 3. This algorithm is capable of doing this without any problems. So this is the magic sauce around the algorithm, is really using this recursive algorithm as the backbones. Now, when I create the script that I just showed you on the whiteboard, what happens is I will just create the migration groups based on the information I have out of the permissions. And I don't have to talk to anybody, right? So let's take a look in depth on how the script works in PowerShell so you can see how MSPComplete deals with that as well. Now what you have here is really my permissions table, right? So what is really crucial is that what we're going to do is create that graph from those permissions and really map the dependencies between the users and the people who have access to their mailboxes. Now, we're going to be using a recursive algorithm. And you're going to see there's not a lot of line of codes, but that is mainly because the algorithm calls itself over and over again to deal with small chunks of that graph. So what you're going to see here is really me going through that graph, looking if it has dependencies, so really has children in that graph. And if it does, go and start doing the script all over and over again until it hits a part where there's no dependencies left. Once it has reached that point, it goes back and identifies all the dependencies attached to that. Because it's recursive, it's really, really powerful, and there's no limit on the number of dependencies and the levels of dependencies in the algorithm. Now, what is crucial is those permissions can be circular. So if you have 4 people, they can all have permissions on each other's mailboxes and really create a loop. Now, recursive algorithms are not good with loops. So one thing you have to keep in mind is to make sure that when you detect a recursive or a loop in your recursive algorithm is really to break that loop. Now, that's what we're going to do here with our action list. So every single time when we've identified a dependency or a user within a dependency, we're going to keep track in the action list. And if we hit that dependency again, we know it's a loop. And that's the way that you're going to prevent the circular or the loop in your recursive algorithm. The last thing you need to do is really make sure every single time when you've identified a group to see if there's no overlaps between groups, because at that point those groups need to be consolidated. And that's what we have with the assigned list. In the assigned list here, we're going to see if there are overlaps between multiple groups and really make sure we cover that. So actually 3 parts to the script. So we have the create list, which is a recursive algorithm that just goes through the list and identify all the different users who are dependencies on each other. Then we have our assign list to keep or look for the overlaps between groups and consolidate them together. And then we have the action list that is being used to prevent any loops in the recursive algorithm. So in the MSPComplete platform, all the necessary tasks will be available. Now, some will still be manually because not everything can be automated, but we will provide you with easy to follow tasks with the necessary prescriptive guidance. Now, automation saves us so much time and money because, let's be honest, anybody can press on that button to run a script, but it will give you peace of mind that it runs with the version that you want at the right time that you want. The best thing about all this automation is the free time I get to spend with my little buddy Declan. Join us for the next episode of the Automation Lab and subscribe to our channel.